Warning, this podcast does explore mature themes that may be triggering to some. If you're in immediate danger, please dial 911. If you are in a crisis and in need of resources, please contact the crisis text line at 741-741. Send the message HOME, and someone will reply. Alternatively, you may also call the National Crisis Hotline at 1-800-273-8255 and contact your healthcare provider for mental health support. Welcome to another episode of Foster Tales, the podcast. I'm your host, Randal Wells. If you haven't already, please follow, like, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at I am Randal Wells, RANDALWELLS. On today's episode, I'll be interviewing Natasha Sparks, my biological paternal cousin, and we're going to have some dialogue around how foster care affects more people than just the people inside of the system itself. It's really a necessary conversation, and I hope you guys enjoy. All right, we are here with Natasha Sparks, my cousin, my family.
Hello.
So Natasha and I've known you since I was born, I guess, because there's pictures, there's photographic evidence of it.
Yes.
I remember a lot of that. So do you have memories?
That's what I was just going to say. The funny part is that, and I guess what's unique about my perspective is that I do have memories. So you are a part of my earliest memories, actually. And I think about that all the time because I'm like, wow, I was pretty young to remember that. Like, I remember things that your mom said. And I have like very vivid memories of instances and feelings that, it's pretty crazy because I must have only been about maybe 3 years old. So they have to be some of my very earliest memories.
Yeah, because we're really not that far apart in age. So
yeah, we're a year.
We're only a year. Golly.
Yeah, you're a year younger than me, a year older than my sister.
That's right. And you have 4 sisters.
3.
Well,
4 of us all together, including me. Yeah.
Just to frame this conversation, and you are my father's sister's daughter. Yeah, there we go.
Yep, your father's niece. Yep.
So I don't like how can we do this? How about you tell me some of your story, or maybe some of the earlier memories we have, and then I can frame this all and put it all together about how we met, and then just ask you, I guess, some questions that maybe I've always had. But this is like an episode of healing, I think, for us, because we have so many interesting characters in our family that we've had to, I guess, bypass, or family curses or generational curses that we've
break the generational curses.
Exactly. And I'm appreciative for it because we are sane, active members of the community. You have kids. You are like are you a soccer mom?
Sort of. The kids don't play soccer, mom. But I mean, yeah, totally. Dance mom and sports mom, and have the SUV, that whole that whole thing. But no, I mean, like I said, though, I think, you were definitely part of my my earliest memories. So we obviously met when you were born. And like you said, there's pictures. I'm holding you. I'm just a toddler myself, but I'm holding you and you're a little baby. We obviously spent Christmases together, holidays, birthdays, things like that. I don't know specifically if your parents, I don't think they ever really lived in Michigan, but they must have visited quite a bit. I mean, for holidays and special occasions. So that part I'm not 100% sure on, where, if they lived here. I don't know if did they live in Michigan ever?
I wouldn't remember because I think I was about 1 or 2 when we went to Florida, but I was born in Connecticut, for the listeners. My mom and my dad were together, married. My mom had a previous marriage. I know that much because when I was growing up, I had a photo album, and I knew that the photo album didn't contain any pictures of my dad because my grandmother did not like my dad. So I felt like she hid all those pictures, and it was really weird to grow up after, my mom passed when I was 6. So for me, growing up, nobody explained to me who all these people were or people
Yeah.
in pictures were. So I never connected the dots. I was like, well, who are all these people? And never knowing. So it was very interesting how you have all these fond memories, and it makes me I feel bad that I don't remember anything.
Well, the thing is I have fond memories, but at the same time, I think it became like a little bit traumatic because I did have the memories. Like my sister Nola was younger, she doesn't have any. But I remembered you being a baby and being my cousin and, always talking about you and wanting to play and hang out and everything. And like I remember very clearly, I think this was probably the last visit that we had together when we were little was I remember your mom and dad coming to our house. I remember it being summer. I remember having sparklers on the porch and I remember swinging on the swing and I remember you pulling my sister's hair or it could have been my hair. I remember that. I remember you had like a bunch of hair in your hands because you wanted somebody to get off the swing. I do remember that little tiff. That's so funny. And
I was a feisty kid. I'd get
I
somebody because
remember.
they had a crayon of mine. I definitely remember that.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I just remember that. I don't remember much beyond that, but I do remember us going to a carnival too. And I remember being super jealous because your parents had you in a stroller and I wanted to be in the stroller so bad. I was tired from walking. And then I remember that your dad won a stuffed animal for you. And there were these two big crayons. They were like the blow up crayons that were like popular at the time. And you had them on both sides of the stroller. And there's a picture to prove that. I'll have to find it. But I do
Yes.
have that memory and being super jealous about it. I remember thinking like I wanted, to be in the stroller and I wanted to have all of those stuffed animals and I wanted someone playing games for me. I remember that. And I do remember your mom, like I specifically remember her talking about you on the airplane and saying, Randall loved when we started to take off and he kept saying, we, this is so much fun.
Yeah, I've
Like
never had a phobia of flying either. That'd be kind of
no,
interesting.
apparently I remember being like jealous about that too. Like, wow, he went on an airplane, we drove everywhere. I didn't go on an airplane until I was like, late teens. But anyway, I have vivid memories of that, you being my cousin, and then all of a sudden you were just gone. So,
Yeah.
as
And
a little girl, it's like I remember always asking questions and not really getting any answers. It was just kind of like nobody knew where you were at. Obviously, we knew that your dad, my uncle, had some substance abuse issues and some demons that he was battling, and we knew that your mom, you know, wanted to get away from that and get away from him, and then she left, and those were pre-internet days, and it was pretty easy to disappear. And so she went down to Florida, I guess, right, with your grandma and start and but yeah, just for me, I always knew you and I knew of you. So here's my family, my cousin, and whenever I saw my uncle, you were with him, and then it wasn't like that anymore. um and so that was always like, I always kind of had like this like longing to know what happened or know where you were, or because like I said, Nola, she didn't remember, my sister Nola, she didn't remember have those memories. So it was like just stories that she would hear or pictures that she would see. um and I do remember my grandma saying, I've sent birthday cards and things like that and they've been returned to me, so I don't know. But she was also very like private, and she may have known maybe where you guys were to send the cards. I'm not sure, but she would never say anything. She was very, very private, and she wanted to always protect her kids, even though they were super dysfunctional. That was like one thing about that side of the family, is that pretty much my mom and all of her siblings had a lot of dysfunction, and their mom kind of, even though she always would say she didn't condone it, I mean, she protected them, pretty fiercely.
yeah, the hard part for me was growing up, not only knowing that my father's name is Randy, so that's why I
Hmm.
don't let people call me Randy, as you
Hmm.
very well know. It's Ran or Randall, never Randy. Um, And to hear some of the stories, and I think about how young I was when I had to have heard these stories, and to have painted a picture of who this person was, not seeing a whole human, but just kind of seeing some of the, I guess, things that happened, or hearing stories of him being an alcoholic. I knew that much. I knew that he and my mom had a very tumultuous relationship, but I didn't get to know any humanity about him. I only ever saw him as this villain. So growing up, like I had no connection to knowing what family was. So fast forward, my mom dies. I didn't know you guys existed. I didn't know any of this information that you guys were there. And then my grandmother started to resent me, and she would call me Randy. She would
Mm.
say things to me to provoke me, and almost compare me to him. And those things became scary to me because it felt like I was going to become an alcoholic, or I felt like I was going to become an abuser. And because I found, and as a child, I found pictures of my mom abused, and my grandmother said that was from your father. And these were like lessons, and I had to have been 8 years old. Like, there's no way that this was like the right or appropriate way to go through anything. And my grandmother's form of discipline was calling the police on me. So ever since I remember the police being called on me as early as 4 years old. And every time I would
Wow.
do something wrong, yeah, exactly, she would call the police, or and the police were there frequently. And so I remember I went and lived in a home, and I think from our grandmother's tale, if you will, I remember her remembering and framing this was that she tried to reach out to my grandmother, and she was told not to interrupt where I was because I was in a new family, and she didn't want me, I don't know, interacting with you guys. So I never knew you guys existed. I remember and I recall, because before my mom died, I was like being auditioned in different homes. So my mom knew she was dying of cancer. And so she knew she wanted to be like me to be in a home where I had a mom, a dad, like what structure is. She's like, I don't want him having this craziness.
Mhm.
And for all that, I appreciated her effort, but it didn't work out that way, unfortunately. Spoiler alert. Um, and so I lived in homes, and then the first family I lived with, they got divorced. I lived with the mom for a while. Mom and I didn't get along. Then I moved back with my grandmother, and then my grandmother continued to call the police. And I'm doing a very short, abridged version. I was arrested at one point in time for just kind of asking my grandma, why doesn't she love me? And based on how she tells the tale of events, I was charged as a kid. And that's kind of where we met again. But
Mhm.
there was a lot that went through, and a lot of trauma that happened in between them. But I had to, it was the last day of 8th grade. And I remember being humiliated because there was a rumor going around my school that I'd stabbed my grandma. And I was like,
Oh.
what? And I remember people saying, like, making up these awful lies. And I had, in 6th grade, was placed in a I guess, a correctional home, a Christian correctional home. And I graduated from there in record time, but experienced trauma there too. And it was like, I felt like, when am I going to get like a second chance? Or like, a person only could go through so much, that I felt like there would be a reprieve somewhere near down the road. So to hear about you guys was actually a sigh of relief. But at that point in time, my only frame of reference of family or just people that left me, because nobody told me
Mhm.
that you guys wanted to stick around. So fast forward to hearing about, hey, your cousin Randall is in Florida. Like, do you remember any of those memories? Like,
Yeah, so I do remember my mom, um, getting a phone call, from someone because I know that your grandmother called the police on you and you had gotten into maybe some trouble, or I mean, you weren't like charged with anything, but they said that you were a part of the system, and that, they thought maybe it would be helpful if they were to reach out to some family and they were able to locate us. So they ended up somehow being able to find my mom and dad, which again, my mom is your dad's youngest sister. So yeah, I remember her telling us, and I remember being really excited. And because I had memories of you. I knew you. I always would say, we had this cousin Randall, and I remember him, and I always wanted to know what happened to you, and hoped you were okay. And I think I honestly, just based upon, like, I remember my mom and our grandma Mickey, saying that, your grandparents on your mother's side had some money, that you probably, had a wonderful life and were super spoiled. Like, I feel like in their minds, they probably painted this picture that, you were probably better off and you were well cared for. And maybe that was just easier for them to envision that. Um, but I do remember that my mom came to us and said that she'd gotten a phone call and said that you were going to be coming up to visit. And at that point, I don't think she said, anything about, maybe you'll want to live there. But I know that she was open to that. I know that she was, like I said, open to that. And when you came, I just assumed you would probably just live with us because, what were you going to go back to? But I don't, and I have foggy memories surrounding how, I know you came for the holidays or for breaks, but I don't really remember, like, how many times. I mean, I know you probably visited, was it maybe like a couple of times a year for like 2 years maybe?
I feel like it was at least 3 times within the cadence of maybe a year. I
Mhm.
remember because I had left a juvenile correctional facility and then stayed with a friend, and then that was told that would only be a temporary residence for me. And I had to serve community service, so I still was. I kind of, I was charged as a minor. It wasn't anything adult, but I had to go through this case with my grandmother. I actually had like a legal battle I had to go through. And my
Mm.
grandma didn't know, like even prior to that, she had no idea what was going on. And I've gotten to
She
share
was
with you
probably
over.
pretty elderly at that point too, right? Wasn't she in her?
Yeah, and that was always the thing, was that she never felt as though she could take care of me. She was in her 80s. So by all means,
Mhm.
I totally get it.
And how old was
But
your mom when she had you?
I could have had to have been like early 30s. I wish I had those memories.
Because
I don't
I
even have
feel like
memories.
it's probably more late 30s because, well, because yeah, I mean, I think she might have been mid to late 30s actually.
Okay. See that you're teaching me things about her, and I wish I knew more about my mom. And I've been trying to reach out like over the years with Facebook and trying to find out, like, everybody always wants to paint this idea of who she was. Like, I've actually had, I've talked to my dad before he passed, and he would always say, "Man, that's Susan. She was crazy. She was a crazy chick," but never. I never got like a real honest idea of like who she was, what did she do as work. I just kind of always looked at her as like this idol, or this person that I
Mhm.
wanted to be there but wasn't able to be, and it just always broke my heart. It was like my first heartbreak. So just knowing that that chain of events kind of just created the chaos in my life. I remember hearing about you guys and being very apprehensive because of all the stories from my grandmother. But the
Right.
one commitment that your mom gave to me when we spoke was that I did not have to interact with my father, which I was like, okay, game. I
Mhm.
remember meeting you guys, and then me and you were around the same age, and then immediately disarmed by the fact that not only were you like down to earth, and I just feel like we have all apparently always have instantly clicked. But then it was like I saw you were listening to Pink, you
Yeah.
had Mariah Carey. I remember the Pink album though, specific for some reason, and then being like, okay, all right, like, wow,
Yeah.
this is different. All right, I like maybe can relax. But yeah, my guard was all the way up, because just thinking about, and the reason that I have to even say that is that I had to have lived in 4 or 5 different homes before I made it to you guys. And I just didn't trust people, and I didn't have a frame of trust for anybody in a family. And I have to go back to the state of mind where I was in, where I was like, who are these people? And I had my guard just all the way up.
Mhm.
So seeing you and having conversations with you and your sisters, I mean, you guys were all normal for me. And it was like, I don't know, your mom intimidated me. She really did. I don't know
Yeah.
why. She just was very, like, it was almost like she was ashamed of what my dad did and almost apologetic. which was nice, because I think if she would have just came as very nonchalant, it would have been, I don't know. I just probably wouldn't have felt comfortable. And your dad was always a godsend. I
Hmm.
love my Uncle Dewey. Um,
Yeah, he's a good guy.
like, and out of like all the men in my life, I sit here and think about him, and he just like, there was no pressure. But I remember vaguely on one of my first visits with you guys, and I remember Grandma Mickey saying, "Well, I love you," and being like, "Okay, bye." like,
Yeah,
like, how do
like
you
you
say
weren't
I
ready for
love
that.
you?
Like you're a stranger. Yeah. Yeah, it felt like she was. But sadly, I mean, I think what a lot of us didn't know at the time when you were coming to visit us was that my mother was also really on a downward spiral in her life, with her alcoholism as well and addiction issues. And I think she was still high functioning at that point, but it was really starting to manifest. And I think that was something, that we really weren't at the time aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes, she had sometimes some erratic behavior, and I think there was like probably a lot of like I'm sure there was probably some bipolar issues or some sort of mental illness that always was undiagnosed, and obviously addiction issues. And I I'm not sure, like I think about this a lot, like what came first sometimes, like the chicken or the egg. Was it like,
Mm-hmm.
were there all these issues in our family because they had untreated and undiagnosed traumas and mental issues? Is that how they all became addicts? Or is it because they had addiction issues and it kind of like evolved into some sort of mental illness? I don't know. Like I said, I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
And that was
it's
the
it's one of
thing.
those.
I didn't know, and we were young. We were young
Yeah,
kids. So
yeah,
to think about that, like, I thought you guys were all, and that's a thing that's a common thread for me now, is I felt like everybody was in on the joke, and not even just the joke, or just like in on what had happened. And so to know that nobody knew, and the only way that you guys would have known is if somebody would have communicated information. And I didn't have the language to tell you guys, oh, okay, this is what I know of my father. And
hmm,
I felt like you guys actually had a decent relationship with him too. So that was kind of scary and off putting. But then I remember you revealing to me that we had other relatives that were also in foster care as well. So it was like, huh, this is almost hereditary. And then
yeah,
realizing like addiction is hereditary and it's a disease. It's not like, sometimes it's not something you really can control. And so having that understanding and trying to be empathetic was really difficult, because I'd grown up with this frame of mind of like, you guys were villains. And so then when I saw that you guys weren't, it was like, what? Like I really resented a lot of male figures in my life because of my father. Like it was a big deal for me.
hmm,
And then just with meeting you guys and being so down to earth, yeah, I don't know.
yeah. I know that, I mean, so it was like, like I said, some of my earliest memories are thinking of you and your parents and feeling like, you had such a happy family, like you were a happy child, you were loved, you were spoiled, and, like little me being jealous, like it's just funny to think about that. But
For sure.
I
It's
know,
crazy. It's crazy and bizarre, because I always liken it. And for me, being a Disney kid, it's Cinderella. It's like, oh, okay, you had this great life. I had this mom, these great memories, and whew, almost like instantly ripped
yeah,
away.
and
And I
good looking
remember,
parents. I like your mom
mhm,
was really well put together, well spoken. She dressed really nice. And that was, I know, something that you'd heard from several people later on, but I always remembered her looking really, her hair was always done and she had nice clothes on. And my mom would say that she was always dressed to the nines. That was something she always said. Um, and I do remember that. And your dad, in his youth, prior to, addiction issues and hard living, he was a good looking man. So like your parents were like this good looking couple. And then, but again, so it was like traumatic for me to see and to just have you gone. And then to see later on, like, your dad would pop up every few years because he lived down south. And he'd be in and out of jail, or living with various friends or people, sometimes being homeless. And but he would always come every couple of years. He would show up at our doorstep, and stay with us for a while. And he'd always say, well, I'm just going to stay for a little bit, but it'd always end up being like, a month or two. And then, my mom would end up kicking him out eventually or what have you. Um, but it was one of those things where I always knew that I wasn't supposed to bring you up. Like
Wow.
it was just one of those things that, we didn't talk about anymore.
Yeah.
Um, we just didn't talk about it anymore. And like I said, that was hard for me as a little kid, actually having those memories and feeling like, so I guess because of that, I always knew like there was so much dysfunction.
Mm.
I was very aware of that, like hyper aware of that. And my parents, they were involved in some things that were, not sometimes on the right side of the law. And I knew that too. There was just a lot of secrets and a lot of dysfunction, and just, that was just how it was. But I just knew not to say anything. I think it was our grandma Mickey who would instruct me, like, you can't bring those kind of things up to him. You can't talk to him about those kinds of things anymore because it hurts him too much, or there's nothing he can do about it and things like that. So I just knew not to say anything. But eventually I did, as an adult. Eventually your dad and I had adult conversations, because I did always have a very, like, he was my favorite uncle. I did have a loving relationship with him, but that's, because I think he wasn't my dad. I didn't have any expectations of him. He obviously just was who he was. I knew he was my drunk Uncle Randy. You know what I mean? He'd pop in and out. He was just a drifter, and he wanted to laugh all the time and sing and like just be funny. And then things always ended up, I don't ever remember exactly why, but I remember my mom would always kick him out. And later on, I would find that because she'd find some, like, drug paraphernalia or something like that in my room, because he would always be in my room and I would sleep with my sister. Um, so then he'd be gone again. And then I'd see him a couple years later. It was always like one of those things. And because he was just my uncle and I didn't have any sort of expectation from him or what have you. And, I was happy to see him. But later on, in my adult life, I did have more, adult conversations with him about you. And I mean, the one thing I guess that I can't, it's hard to say admired. It's not like the best word to use, because I probably didn't admire much about him, right? But
Yeah.
um he didn't ever really like make an excuse for himself. He was just pretty honest about everything, and he just kind of said like, I'm not a good person. And I offer nothing to his life. I would offer nothing but drama and dysfunction, and I have nothing. And he just kind of just like accepted that. And he was just, I think he felt like it was better for you to be away from him than to have him in your life.
And that's a hard thing. It was when you told me that, and we've had these conversations before, so I don't mind
Mhm.
sharing these things, but to know and to hear that, it felt like a cop out. And prior to
Mhm.
that, all my self-worth left me. I grew up, and like one of the first families I lived in, or like, I don't know. I just remember the mom going through a divorce, and maybe just it was out of her own spite and anger for the divorce. But I never felt like an attractive guy, probably until this year. But I remember like one of the parents saying, "You look like Hitler," which was
Oh,
crazy to me because it was like,
you had a Jewish
wow,
side.
exactly.
Also,
I'm 51%
like, what? That's
Ashkenazi
probably the
Jew.
worst thing you can say.
It is the hands down worst thing you could say. And
What
so
an
then,
insult.
and then to always feel as though I needed. And so, like, when they were going through their divorce, I didn't feel like anybody was fighting for me. My grandma was constantly trying to give me up. I lived in
Mhm.
at that point in time, I lived in a facility where I was then molested, which I never really revealed to anybody. And those were
Mhm.
things I wasn't able to unpack and tell people. And so up until that point, I felt like I was trash, and that I was passed down trash. And I was just trying to convince people to like love me. Just love me,
Mhm.
please. And I will do anything. And I almost think that's what birthed the entertainer in me, because I was just like, whatever you need, I will do that. Whatever you need to be, I will do that. But please just take care of me. Like, and there was only one family, I lived with the African American family, as you knew. And so people then misread what my energy was. And I was trying to not Like all the references that I had were from Black culture. And so then people were like, oh, you're a poser. And I'm like, I'm not a poser, but these are the only people that are talking to me or teaching me things. I didn't even know how to
Mm-hmm.
properly brush my teeth, I think, until I was 18 years old. Like
Oh,
I didn't
wow.
know how to bathe myself. And so to think about those things, I remember actually, this is a funny memory. I remember your mom, the first time I went to visit, gave me a washcloth. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? I'd never bathed with the washcloth before. Like there were things
Mm-hmm.
that I fundamentally didn't learn until I got well after foster care and just like in life. And I'm like, oh, I didn't learn that lesson. So I felt like I skipped lessons. So getting to you guys was almost like you were either you somehow, some way, I felt like you guys knew everything that happened to me, not knowing that you didn't know anything except for what I would tell you.
And that's the thing that I was just going to bring that up was that, you and I would have many conversations, but I always felt like there was probably a lot beneath the surface, and I felt like you weren't telling me everything, or you weren't comfortable or didn't want to reveal things, and I didn't push it. I figured I would wait until you were ready to, but I didn't know about any of the abuse or anything like that, but I felt like there was a lot more, and I did feel that you were kind of maybe concealing a lot or just not opening up about it. Even though we were close, or I felt like we were close. I felt like we had a connection, but I guess I just felt like maybe you weren't there yet, and maybe eventually you would, which you did. And obviously, years and years later, we actually had some more like open, honest conversations, and it's obviously just always been supernatural for us. But back then, I felt like there was a lot that you weren't being open about, and I think when you're younger, sometimes it's much harder to even know how to articulate certain things, or how it's not until you're older and you are able to reflect back on things that you're actually able to process it sometimes. So
Yeah, I mean, I think of that story that I always tell you with your mom, where I think it was one of the first times I came to visit. She gave me $100, and then
mhm.
was like, "You have this to spend while you're here. You can spend it on anything you want, just whatever you want. You don't have to be without. So here you go." And then her taking me to a gas station and being like, "Do you want anything?" And then at me asking for a candy bar, and she was like, "You're really cheap." I was like, huh? And I mean, like, what do you mean I'm really cheap? And she's like, you have money. I gave you money. Why aren't you give me some of the money that I gave you to get a candy bar? And I was sitting here thinking about what am I going to eat when I get home? Or, I don't have clothes for something, just thinking about where my life was. My grandma didn't ever want to, she always made it seem like we didn't have money. And she always, and it very well could have been that, except I then have since had conversations that she was getting money to take care of me. And not saying it was like money, but it was like a kid has essentials that he needs and clothes. And nobody was teaching me how to wear clothes. I think if you can remember, I wore incredibly oversized pants. I always had a
Mhm.
very slim figure, but I think I was wearing 36s and I had like a 29 waist. And that
Yeah.
was the trend then, which was like
I was gonna say, I
oversized.
think that that was sort of a trend back then, but yes, they were probably like a little bit too oversized even for the trend. Yeah.
Yeah, even for that, and just thinking, like, I remember, I think your mom might have taken me, no, your mom or our grandma might have taken me clothing shopping because they saw, like, hey, he doesn't have anything to fill a suitcase. Or, like, I remember even getting toothpaste or a toothbrush and just like having just the bare essentials. So conversations did come up that eventually led to them saying, hey, do you want to live here?
Mhm.
And at first I had accepted and was like, yeah, let's try this. And so then it was like, okay, you're going to go to Natasha's school. And it became real. And then I started doubting it, and then feeling like this is going to fail just like everything else. And then going through high school and then starting to formulate bonds with people that I was again with. And then I think my birthday came up. And I remember Grandma Mickey or somebody like that saying, hey, your dad wants to talk to you for the, your birthday. He feels bad that he couldn't get you a birthday card. And he may or may not have been drinking. And I remember that being like what? Like, and they were like, well, will you talk to him?
Mhm.
And that was just the most awkward, like, it was a thing that I feared. And then it was almost like, he was like, "Is this my son?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I cannot do this today." Being
Yeah.
like, "Hey, Randy, how are you?" Like, I never called him dad. I never called him,
Mhm.
by my father. And we never met in person. You know, spoiler alert, I didn't get to see him. He died, but, without me never like meeting him. I mean, other than my childhood memories.
Did you speak to him on the phone before he passed away, or I'm
I
not.
don't remember if he allowed me to. I might have. But I think that was like, those were things that I were fears of mine, like of even talking to him and facing it. And then when I found out he was going to die, I think either you or, yeah, it was you probably. It was just
Mhm.
like, "Hey,
Yeah.
here's the situation." And I remember, like, I was homeless at the time in here in LA, and being like, "Well, let me figure out what I'm going to do to get a plane ticket and to try to see him before he passes." And because I didn't want to tell you guys that I was homeless either. So there was just so much going on during that time.
Mhm.
And I inevitably, he didn't follow through or say, and then he passed. So it became and then he passed of liver cancer.
Well,
So
yeah, well, they were saying he said cancer too, I think for his mother. I don't know, maybe that was better or more dignified, but, it was obviously alcoholism, cirrhosis.
yeah, for sure. And to know that and to hear that and try to understand. And for me, as I got older, I'm like, okay, what's the realized
Mhm.
version of a human? Can you make a mistake in life and be forgiven for it? Absolutely. Like, did I make mistakes as a kid? Yeah. But I go back to those moments and I'm like, I was a kid. And so I needed
Mhm.
parents. I needed somebody to correct me and tell me I was wrong. But I remember the reasoning and the logic why, and I prepared her for this. But I found out not immediately, but like maybe I guess it was a few months or even a year down the line, that I have a sister.
Mhm.
And I remember that information made me so angry. And I know you were taken aback because you were like, "I thought you would have liked to know this because she's into the same things as you." Like, she's this.
I know. That was when Facebook just started coming out, and I had just lost my younger sister, Nevada. So I thought when I stumbled across her that I was like, this could be so amazing for you. I happened to see on Facebook, and it was funny because I was trolling Facebook, and it just, it was becoming mainstream and popular, and everyone had one at this point. And I remember seeing a photo of this girl, and she looked like my mom to me, and she had the name, the spelling that my mom told me, because I never met her. I had always just heard that he had a daughter, that she looked like me as a baby, and I think they had only seen pictures, or but that was it. There was never I never met her, and there was no memories surrounding that. I just always heard she looked like me. And so when I saw this picture, I saw that I thought she looked like my mom,
Mhm.
and she had the same name. And then she's put on there, she loved making the band, and you were on it. So I saw that, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so perfect. And he's going to get to experience, the love of a sibling, something I had just lost, and that I wanted you to have that. And I thought, this is amazing for both of you, for her and you, although I didn't know, if she had other siblings or what her life was like. But I just saw that. So then I messaged her and I asked her, if her dad's name was Randy, and I had found out what her mom's name was. And I asked her if that was her mom, and she said yes. And, I was so excited, but I know you were like, you weren't ready, I don't think, at that
No.
point for that. You were in a phase of life where you just weren't ready to face that, because I remember when we had that conversation when you were younger, when we were teenagers, and I said, "Did you know that your dad had a daughter? We've never met her. I don't know where she lives, but I had heard, that he had a daughter." I always wondered about her too, because especially hearing that she looked like me, I thought, "Wow, is this like my twin out there?" I never knew. Um, but I told you that, and I remember you feeling like that was something that hurt your feelings, because you felt like your mom didn't know that, because that would have been something that would have come up, you thought, in a conversation with
Yeah.
your grandma, probably, if that was known. So
Yeah,
you
for
thought your
sure.
mom must not have known that, and then I think it hurt your feelings, because you thought even more so that your dad must have just been living a lie, and your
Yeah.
mom probably just didn't, she didn't know that, or, that was a surprise to you. So I remember you feeling like, that kind of hurt your feelings a little bit because you thought that was something that your mom was completely in the dark about. Um,
It was the idea of what I told myself who I was. So in my
mhm,
head, I was this kid who came from this loving family. That in my head, again,
mhm,
and frame of mind, like my mom, I didn't, not even knowing that my mom had a previous marriage, putting those pieces together didn't really
right.
click. So in my head, this is my mom and she's married to my dad and they had me and something happened. And then that was that. And that was the story I told myself
Mhm.
because
Yeah, so this
I
disrupted.
had nobody to narrate this story to say,
Right.
by the way, your mom was married before, your dad was married twice before, never divorced. So,
Yeah.
to know all of these things and to find out these things was such a reality check for me because I like you said, I wasn't ready to hear any of this. Like I was like, wait, what other secrets are you guys hiding? Like, this is crazy. And I remember being like, they're just going to continue to pile on the secrets. And it hurt me so much. And then I was like, yeah, I can't live here.
Mhm.
I can't do this. And then even at that age, I already kind of, and I think you might have felt that too. Like I knew I wanted to sing. Like I always knew I wanted to be an entertainer and a performer. And I think at that age, I
Mhm.
might have told you that I wanted to live in New York. And
Yes.
I never, so hearing Detroit was not, or Detroit adjacent, to
Well,
be
and
polite.
yeah, and to be fair, Detroit then I remember taking you through was, there it was some tough times for Detroit. I mean, it's come a long way since then. It's a totally different place, which I would love to show you sometime. But back then there was a lot of blight. It was a lot of chaos. And there was a place you didn't really go. You didn't go downtown. And I remember driving you through there and you were probably like, oh no, this is not where I see myself. So
At
I
all.
understand. And I understand that. And we also, I mean, we didn't come from, my family, my little family, we didn't come from means or anything. We were, I mean, I wouldn't say we were super poor, but we definitely didn't have a lot of money. We lived in a tiny house and, not the greatest neighborhood. It wasn't terrible, but I mean, it wasn't the greatest. It just probably wasn't, that was all I knew. But I think you maybe coming into it thought, well, maybe this just isn't for me. And I get it. I totally get it. And I know you and I had a great connection, but I know my mom was, like we bring up the conversation about you being at the store with her. I mean, it's funny because, back then we didn't even pay attention to what she was buying because we grew up in those party stores and we were there every day. She was buying beer and cigarettes every single day,
Yeah. And I
every
remember seeing
single
you
day, and
guys
putting it in a
drink.
glass.
Seeing you guys drink in the holidays freaked me out. I was scared of alcohol. I was scared of doing anything. I remember just being, and I remember judging you guys so bad, like, oh, these are
Hmm.
awful kids. And I really had such judgment. I was like, their parents aren't even raising them. And I'm going through all this and having such judgment for anybody who used substance before they were 18. And oh, like, how could you? And I might have partaken, I think, one or two times. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
even know if I got to that point where my guard
I
was
mean, yeah,
down,
we
but I
definitely
judged you
wanted
guys
to
at
have a good
first.
time with our friends. And yeah, it was, and I mean, and in the home, like I said, things were starting to evolve, which at that point, we didn't really know, but my mom was battling, alcoholism, and it hadn't really manifested itself yet in the way that it ended up. But, and I think that's a big part of the reason why, because there's a lot of like, for me, there's a lot of like years that are just kind of like a fog. I feel like I lost touch with a lot of people. I went through a lot of things, and just my family did in general. And I think that after that, things just kind of, I think, like I said, we lost touch for a while. Um, when my mom left and everything, and her alcoholism really started to breathe, just started to take over her life. So I think it was just a time where we were all trying to, my sisters and I were struggling to try to somehow put the pieces back together and find some sort of normalcy, and which wasn't happening for any of us. But um,
Not at all. Like I
n-
just remember going separate ways and then being like, well, that was that. And then I went into survival mode because I went through a group home and then got on a TV show. And then our cousin, who I guess she can remain nameless for now, messaged me after she saw I wasn't making the band and was like, "Hey, I saw you were on Making the Band. Can you give me $10,000 to close on my house?"
Oh, geez.
And just being like, "I've never talked to you. I haven't talked to you since I was 15 years old." And her coming out and having her hand out. And then I just remember you being like, "This is so dope. This is everything that you said that you wanted to do." And you've always been a support system to me. So I really appreciate you above all else for just like you didn't judge me. I didn't feel like you ever judged me, and you asked a lot of questions. And I know that had to have had an impact on you too. So I use you as the example for people just like that. You just kind of were patient with me. Like you
Mhm.
weren't like rushing me. You were like, he will get to his process. Like, where do you think that comes from in you? Like that.
I probably my dad, like we my dad is my mom and dad were complete opposites, and my mom liked to talk a lot. She never listened to anyone. My dad's quiet and he's patient, the most patient person. I'm definitely not as patient as him, but he listens to people and he hears you. And I think he's always like instilled that in me. So, and that's actually been one of my, greatest strengths in business, and a part of my success in my career is that I hear people, I listen to them, and I take the cues that they're giving me. And I could tell even at a young age, and it was, I guess, an innate thing, that I could tell that you weren't ready to open up about a lot of things. And I didn't press the issue, and I knew, it would happen in time, which ultimately it did. Took years and years later, obviously, but I'm just glad that that we've always managed to stay in touch, and that we have reconnected. You're one of, my most cherished family members, and I'm grateful to have you in my life, and grateful that we can share these raw experiences with one another without judgment, and be proud of ourselves for where we've come, how far we've come. I mean, and from where we came from. Um, the things like you talked about, the things that we are consciously navigating away from, and the generational curses and cycles and patterns that we're breaking, that we are going to they end here. They end with us. They end here. They're not going to continue. And I'm really proud of that, and I'm proud of you.
Well, thank you. I mean, as you say that, it's like I remember, I hear statements and I ask you questions all the time, and I feel bad. You've expressed to me before. You're like, this is kind of really a awful predicament or a place for you to be, because it's like you always are kind of letting people down when you have to
I
tell
you know
them,
and that has
and
been
I
a
feel so bad for
repeated
you.
theme. Well, it's been a repeated theme in my life, because I mean, not only with you, but I mean, with your sister, with us reconnecting with her, with another cousin of ours, that we reconnected at when our aunt's son, um, who, was adopted. And then even like a cousin who came out of, she was adopted. She was a second cousin of ours, adopted, and contacted me recently. I have had, I haven't had great news for anyone. And it's hard because, it, um, it's hard for me to tell people these things, and to say, I'm so happy that you found us, but this is what you found. Like, it's not a it's not a pretty sight, I guess. It was, a lot of dysfunction and chaos and addiction and mental illness, and just, that was my normal. But I still always felt, I still do to a degree, feel guilt, because even though that may have not been, you know, the most ideal family dynamic or situation to be brought up in, I still had it, and you guys didn't, and so I still feel like maybe a little guilty
You
for
should
having
never
these
feel
memories.
bad.
But at the same time, it's like, yeah, like my memories that I have are all that you guys will ever have. That is pretty heavy. I mean, that is like, that does kind of put a little bit of a weight on your shoulders, because it's like, this is all what I remember, is the only memory of like your mom, and like me hearing those things. That's all you'll ever hear, probably, of someone saying, I remember this about her, and she said this, and I remember seeing you together, with your parents together. Like, it's like my memories are this vault for so many people. And unfortunately, I do feel really bad that there weren't happier endings for you
Yeah.
guys. Like, I think I had always envisioned, like with you and your dad, like maybe some like grandiose idea that you would rekindle a relationship or something, or maybe, maybe his life would he would maybe get his life together. Maybe this is what he needed to get his life together, and that's never materialized. And even, my own mother, like just seeing the power that addiction has over people. Um, she's also now dying of cirrhosis, and doesn't have custody of her youngest daughter. Just seeing that decline is just, it's difficult. It's difficult, but yeah, I do feel bad because I always wanted to have, like I said, better news for everybody or a happier story to tell, and it just isn't there.
And for me, I felt freedom in being able to go out and redefine myself and never having to look at you guys for answers. And so for me, I don't feel the burden that you feel. And so, people oftentimes don't ever think, and maybe even me, like, I don't realize how my decisions impact other people. And so that's why I thought this discussion, above all else, was really important, because it's like, you actually did care.
Hmm.
And I can't minimize the fact that I have somebody in my life now, which, even having gone through everything, I'm thankful for the end result, because I'm thankful that I do have family. And I think that's the real love story in all this, to have you, to have
Hmm.
Nola, and then and obviously now, to have Erica. Um,
Your
and
sister, yeah.
she and my sister Erica, and she will actually be a guest. She's agreed. And I think us telling our story and putting these stories out there, people always they say every family has, like, they're as sick as their secrets. And like, you're
Hmm.
right. It's just like, let's put it all out there, because this wasn't right to begin with. Like, it never was right. And now it's like, well, how do we fix it? And it's like us preparing, and really, like, the pandemic changed a lot of plans for all of us, because we had all talked about going and doing a Thanksgiving, and we need to create those memories, and it's hard when we're
Hmm.
all in separate parts of the U.S. So, me being on the West, at least, you being still in Michigan, Erica being on the East Coast, and Nola now being, is she in the South?
She's in Seattle.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so she's further north. It's really hard because we're all spread out, but to be able to be family, and then to redefine what family is, because it's
Yes.
not this traditional mindset, but I at least still have memories with you guys, and I'm thankful
Hmm.
for those memories. And that's the hard part to communicate, even out to my sister, because I feel like for her, she wanted to know who you guys were, and so my reaction, I sometimes feel selfish in my reaction, that I did have the reaction because she didn't get to build those memories with you guys. And maybe I might have spoiled something for her. So I feel
Well, at
guilty.
that time, we wouldn't have been able to find her. I mean, that was like when the internet was just first starting. You know what I mean? I don't think it was, you would have to look through phone books. It was probably something that, but like I said, as soon as that became a thing, then we did find her, and you ultimately you did connect. And that's the important part.
Mhm.
Maybe the timeline wasn't, it's super ideal for anyone, but I think that's just what makes us human. And ultimately you did connect, and you do have a beautiful relationship, and a concept of family, so that makes me really happy. That makes me happy that you have one another.
And then me and
And
you,
yeah.
we got to live out our dream and see Mariah Carey in Las Vegas.
We
Part of the
did.
Lamely. And then how
Seriously.
crazy how they we brought an extra guest and went to guest services, and they were like, well, it's not a sold out night, so you guys can move to like the front row. We were like four rows from Mariah.
Yes, total dream come true. And I was like so excited that you were there with me. It was honestly perfect. One of my happiest and best memories, honestly.
Yes,
Um,
talk about bucket list items for me. Like, I just think I
bucket
go
list.
back, I go back to, like, that was like what made me bond with you, was like, oh, you listen to the same music as me. And I think I just remember
Yes.
like listening to music in your room and us just singing. And those are the memories I go back to and, cherish.
Hmm.
I try to drown out the abuse, even though that I know that it was there, but it's like there was loving moments in this. Like, we went to
There was
the Christmas town, and how we celebrated Christmas together. And I was like,
Frankenmuth.
that was nice. Frankenmuth. And remember being a German town, and just
Yeah, it's a
having,
weird little town.
just thinking about all those memories, and getting to have memories with your sister who passed. And I remember feeling helpless in that situation too, and finding out about, the loss of a sister for you, and just how much trauma this family has had to go through. Like,
You
we
know,
are
I
really sane.
I will say we do have there is, one memory we kind of skipped over is when my mom had already left at this point and we were older. I think I was probably like 19 or 20. And we went to Florida, remember? And
That's
we
right.
called you. We called you and said, "Hey, we're close to you. Do you want to come to our hotel?" Do you
And I
remember
did.
that?
Yeah, I do
And
remember
then
that.
you
And I
did,
remember,
and you did. And it was just very spontaneous, very random. But we called you, you came and hung out with us, with my sisters and my dad and I. And I remember you bringing you had a photo album and you brought it, and it had you speaking at a foster care event, or you were some sort of a spokesperson or an advocate. And I remember you showing us these pictures. And I remember my sisters and I were like, wow, like, this is, wow, this is crazy. Seeing those pictures really and hearing your stories, like, because I think you might have told us the stories before, but it wasn't real for us because we didn't see that, or, and then we saw that and we're like, wow, that's pretty amazing. Like, I remember we were pretty proud of you.
well, and I missed you guys, and I never had any animosity. And then when your mom and dad got divorced, it almost felt like, thank God, because I might have
Yeah.
ended up in a foster care system. And I know your dad would have never let that happen. And I've
Hmm.
always, even though he's not biologically my uncle, but he's always my uncle, and I love
Hmm.
him. And it's weird to have collective family and to be
Yeah.
able to claim people who have no blood relation, and then to have you who has blood relation. And it used to be such family was the F word. Family
Yeah.
was always the F word to me, and I was always scared to say it. And I was scared to say I love you, and I was scared to be vulnerable because I felt like you would leave me. And then as we became adults, it was like, oh no, like, you actually do care. It's not like you're saying this because your parents are making you. Because maybe that was part of my frame of reference. Like, some of the kids that I live with, they only they acted like they liked me, but it was because their parents were like, you better act good. But they didn't really want me there. They wanted their
Hmm.
parents to themselves. And you guys were so selfless. All of you and Nola and Nevada, just even in that, I remember Nevada having a tiff when you guys were in Florida.
Yeah, lots of tips.
She was feisty, but
She was a feisty one, yeah,
she
but
was a
she was
lot
funny.
like me, though. Like, she
Yes.
and I were really similar, and that's it's so funny. And then to have met Erica and to have the same facial expressions, and oh my goodness, does she look like your mom? It's just crazy. It's so crazy. And then
Yeah.
to see pictures of my dad, and now to look at them, because I did that this last week. A friend come visit, and to go through the photo album and to be able to look at him and say, you know what, I do look like him. And then you revealed something to me when we saw Mariah that shook me to my core for life. You told me that I get my vocals from my father. I had
Yes.
no idea that he sang. I knew you were a good singer, but I didn't know that
He
he
sang
was.
all the time.
And I
And he
remember when.
loved Motown, and he was like, yeah, he had a very like eclectic taste in music, especially, but I mean, I feel like he definitely gravitated toward like R&B as opposed to like rock and roll, which,
And that correlation shook me to my core, because to be like, you know what, you weren't there, but you gave me my most precious, like, the thing that I hold value to myself,
hmm
that provided me a little bit of healing. It was like, if you gave me anything, you gave me some of the best parts of me. And
hmm
and now I can be like, I am beautiful, and I do look like him. So I'm like, you know what, I'll take it. And then for us to be related, it's like, it really, it means something. I have some pride for who we are.
hmm
And where we come from. And even though it's not much, it's like we have something. And before, I had nothing, I had no frame of reference. And so it's like, all right, cool. I mean, I'm not a
hmm
Detroit Lions fan, but I can at least say I've been.
sadly, we have no choice, but yeah.
I
Yeah.
just, it's crazy to have these talks and conversations, because it's like, all the things I remember. Like, I remember you guys freaking out when you heard that I sang for the very first time, because wasn't there a story about Grandma Mickey and your mom going to see a fortune teller?
Yes, and she said that she told she told Grandma Mickey that she was going to have a grandson who was famous, and he was a famous musician and sang.
Which is crazy. That part hasn't happened yet, but
There's still time. There's
there's
still
still
time.
time. The time is ticking. There's no timeline on our dreams. Now, what I love that you do now, like as an adult, is like you manifest things. Can you share
Yes.
some of that? Like
Yeah.
what
So,
are
I
your
mean,
mantras? Like how do I manifest something? Like I feel like you manifest family because I feel like you definitely manifested me because the love
no,
that we
I
had was always
agree.
there because we have
You know,
pictures and I'll share
well,
them this
I
week.
always wanted to know my cousins because there was you who I actually remembered losing, and then there was your sister who I had heard about, and then there was another cousin of ours who, our aunt's son, who, she always still talked about and made him very real. And I always wished that I knew you guys. I always wish I grew up with you. I always felt like this, like an emptiness. Like there was a lot of people who weren't at the holidays that should have been. I just felt like I wished that we had one another. I wish you were around. And so yeah, it is kind of cool because maybe I did manifest that because um I feel like I've sort of been kind of the glue that's kind of like, all kind of like held us together. And you did, you all, I do know who you are now.
Mhm.
I still haven't met your sister, but I hope to, I really do.
Your
I do
cousin.
feel like I do feel like I know her just from, conversations and things like that. But all of the cousins that I was missing, it's like we all did find one another, at some point. So that's really cool. But, um, I don't know. I've always manifested and didn't like consciously know I was doing it. But I did, over the years realize how much power our thoughts really actually have. And so I've tried to, change the narrative a little bit more in my favor. And, obviously, and to create like this amazing life, which I do. I am really grateful. I do feel like I have, despite where I've come from and despite some of the chaos and the hardships that I've endured, not just with my parents or, my background, but in relationships and, even with my own children, with their father, I feel like I finally just like, I haven't become a statistic with all of the negativity and all of the odds were against me too.
Mhm.
Um,
Even more
and
because at least I had a support, and I always think of that too. It's like I at least had the foster care system. For you, what did you have to fall back on with these crazy people around you as models for this is the adult? And I always feel like something propelled you. Were like, I am not going to be around you guys. Like I'm going to go do this and complete it. And you completed school, you completed your education. Like you made it happen for yourself, and that
thank you.
motivated me
Well,
because
you
you just
motivated
always
me
had that
too.
candy.
I always thought the same about you, which is funny because, you're a well-educated person and, you know, you're successful and it's like, and what role model did you have? And it's, no, you
You
should definitely be proud. Yeah.
you because
Well,
you didn't tolerate things, and actually I had just interviewed Paul, who's my foster brother, and to know like how you addressed the drama that was happening in your household is kind of
mhm,
how I addressed the drama in the group home, because I had
mhm,
you as a frame of reference. I was like, no, wait, hold on, how is this happening? No, this is not what we're going to do. And I
oh
remember
yeah,
like you were the parent in your household even at like
I was
15 and
very much.
16. You were very much a
Hmm.
parent, and I feel
Hmm.
like you were always an adult, and I feel the same of myself. I don't ever feel like I was a child. So now I'm like a kid eating like Cap'n Crunch protein shakes. And like I see it come out on myself. I'm like, I was robbed of a childhood. No. But I mean, just seeing that and having you as a point of reference for how you dealt with people. And I had such adoration for you, and just seeing who you were just as a human, and was like, oh, that's in me too, and those pieces. So it's funny that we've kind of both pulled from one another, because to me, when I feel like I don't have it, I can at least look and see that you've done it. And now like when I don't have it, I can call you and say, hey, this isn't amazing, and you and I have honest conversations and dialogue. And I do love you, and you are like one of my favorite humans in life, and I'm
Me
so
too.
thankful for our bond, to have you and to be able to say this is crazy, and you're like, I don't feel like we've ever really had a blowout fight. I feel like for the most part, you're always like, yeah, that is crazy. Wait, what? Like, I don't know that we've ever really disagreed. I mean, there's been things where we're like, yeah, well, I don't like that. But like, for the most part, I feel like fundamentally we're always on the same wavelength, which is really
Yeah. Well, you get my humor and vice versa, which is, it's nice to be able to laugh with someone. You know, sometimes people don't get my jokes or my sense of humor, but you always do. You never miss it. So that's nice to have that. But you know, for me too, though, I feel like, and one of the things that we've talked about in our adult conversations, is just kind of our healing. We've been focused on that, on healing, on just becoming our best selves, um, and letting go of the past. And I think even though we're kind of rehashing the past and talking about it, um, I
that's how you let
think,
it go, you know? How
well,
else?
it's yeah, exactly. You kind of like, you know, you rationalize it, you talk about it, you bring it to light, you face your demon and you look it in the eye, and it's not scary anymore. And then you're able to just to breathe. And but I feel like even with these people, like I always had this like juxtaposition of feeling angry, because I loved you and I hated the situation that you were in, but then I also loved my uncle.
Mhm.
So it was like, it was just, you know, just very dysfunctional, and nothing was black and white, lots of shades of gray,
Mhm.
which when you're younger, you know, that it doesn't make sense to you. But I've learned in my adult life that everything's a shade of gray, and that's okay. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be black and white. It doesn't have to be good or bad. It doesn't. And for me, I've also, um, you know, I like with my own mother, it took me years to forgive her and to not allow, you know, her choices and her absence to, you know, really just affect me on a daily basis. But you know, I had to kind of like really look at things from an adult perspective and humanize these people that I had villainized. Um, and then just ultimately just choose to, you know, just take it for what it is, and not let them be the monsters under the bed anymore, you know,
Yeah,
just to.
for sure. Once I did that for my dad and realized like, oh, he was a hurt kid. And then
Mhm,
learning some of his upbringing and then
mhm,
like learning that he might have been abused himself and
mhm,
that like that there's a story underneath the monster and that it's not sometimes the narrative that we paint. And obviously I can't edit how somebody else does, but I know there are the times in my life where people have villainized me, and I know that was never my intention. I don't feel like a lot of people, there are very few people, I would say. I mean, obviously we know, we see, you know, drama crimes on Netflix where there are evil people out there, but there's sometimes you hurt somebody and you don't inadvert, you just, it's just kind of collateral damage, or it's just something that you're not conscious of, that you were hurting somebody to make a decision for yourself, and you don't realize all the people that are impacted by that. And so for me, like learning about him has been healing, because then it was like it wasn't so personal. He didn't just leave me. He was sick.
mhm. And that's
And
it. And you hit the nail on the head, is that we tend to internalize things and take it very personal, you know, especially when you have abandonment issues from a parent. Um, you know, that's hard to get over. Those are the people that are supposed to love you unconditionally. Those are the people that have let you down. And that's something that's just a very heavy burden to carry. And you know, I know you know that very well. And me too, with my mom leaving. I mean, even though it was a little bit later, you know, in my teen years or what have you, it was hard, having that and then not having it. Um, and that was something that I had to, you know, I had to face too. But just, yeah, I had, you know, I think that's a big part of healing though. And moving forward is just to really face the issue and really give, you know, really humanize these people and kind of see the background, and know that it wasn't you. It's not like, it's not you. They didn't just leave because they hated you. I mean, they have a lot of issues, and obviously you were collateral damage, and that's unfortunate. But you know, really not to take it personal, and not to just internalize it about yourself is, I think, really important, and the biggest step toward healing.
yeah, and learning how to love like properly and realizing like love.
Not be so guarded.
Exactly. Like, and to be receiving of love and to be love. And that's hard. it's a really hard thing when you realize it and you're healing, and then you see the hurt in other people. And I think that's when
Hmm.
you realize, like, oh, I've made it past and through, is when you can see and see that in other people, because we have gone through so much craziness, with these points of reference. And I think we've done a good job of saying, hey, I don't want to go down that road, and I know that this exists, so let me let me not drink as much, or
Yeah.
let me not accidentally, or I don't even want to try this out, because I recognize, like, I could very well get addicted to this. And for me, even just becoming an adult and being at 21 and being like, okay, I was always scared to be drunk, because I was always afraid I was going to turn on my dad. And now I can have a shot of whiskey and be all right. But like, the reality to me is that it's like knowing that there are consequences, and we have that in us. And so I think just even having that model, so we don't pass this on. And now you have kids, and you're such a fantastic mom, and you're
No, thank
supportive
you.
of them. And so it's like, which I haven't even gotten to, I've watched them grow up on social media, that I haven't even gotten to see them. So I definitely need to coordinate a trip, to at the very least, to see them. But I would love, us to have like a little family reunion. And
Yeah.
we have to figure that out. Like, now that the world is opening up, it makes
Yes.
things more doable. But it was like, us planning Thanksgiving and being like, let's just all have Thanksgiving and come up, and we're going to do this. And now we have a haunted house in our family. So I don't know that I want to go
Let's go
visit
there.
there.
Let's go do a seance.
Let's go to a seance, which that's a story
Uh,
for another time. I probably have to have
yeah.
you on as a guest for a second interview to explain that. But just, I'm thankful for you as family, even to kind of like even close this out, and to know, like, you have my back, and I know
Hmm.
that unconditionally, and like, I love you. Yeah.
I love you. And and I can say that, and mean it and be comfortable and happy to say that to you, because I do. I love you. We say it all the time, and
We
that's good.
do, and it's healing.
We do.
I was scared. I was scared to say it, because I felt like if I said it, then I would jinx something. And I thought, because everybody I loved left me. So for the
Yes.
longest time, I was so scared. I was always scared of the goodbyes. Like, when I left you guys, I don't know that you guys knew that I was sobbing on the planes back to Florida, or sobbing on the car rides back. Like, so, to have you in my life, and I want to be closer to everybody, and to understand where their story is, because their story is my story, and it's all of our stories. And I think
Hmm.
it's just creating legacy now, and
Yeah,
changing the narrative. I think that's where it is.
I think so. I think so too. Well said.
Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, please support the podcast by liking and subscribing to wherever you stream your podcasts. Special thank you to Natasha, Steph Reed, who produced the intro music and outro music that you hear. And special thanks to you for listening. Have a great week. Take care.